Friday on Daily Delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you all are doing well out there. Great show today. Phil Miller from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a few minutes to talk about the Twins. He was on the entirety of their 7-game road trip, one that, if you just kind of look at it on its face, was a success. They went 4-3. They beat Texas the first 3, then they lost 3 in a row to the Rangers and Padres, but then won the finale 11-4. Lots to like with the results. They gained some ground on Cleveland. They're only 2 games back of the Guardians, heading into a long stretch of home games now, starting Friday night against the Cardinals. I think Pablo Lopez versus Sonny Gray on Saturday. That should be a fun matchup of the former teammates. So lots to look forward to with the Twins. Lots to look forward to this weekend in general in Minnesota sports. We'll get to that at the end of the show. First, though, what did I miss? Let's start with the Vikings. I haven't talked a lot about the Vikings this week. They've been a little bit, I don't want to say out of sight, out of mind, but ever since the J.J. McCarthy injury a couple weeks ago, we've been kind of like sitting here like what's there to talk about with this team? What's the optimism level? What's the mood going into the 2024 season? And I've kind of settled on a few different thoughts with this team. I don't think they're going to be great, and I don't think I'm alone in that. I mean, you look at ESPN's projection model, they've got like a 15% chance of making the playoffs according to that. Like they're kind of ticketed for another 7-10 season in that kind of squishy zone, and it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I think, like we've talked about, if they're being honest, this isn't the year they're pushing all the chips in. They're certainly still trying to win. Nobody's punting on a season. Signing Stephon Gilmore was a step in that direction, and J.J. McCarthy probably wasn't going to play a whole lot anyway, which brings me to the biggest point about this season. Now, a lot of things could go right for them. There's reasons for optimism. I think the defense could be pretty good, especially if they have good health, especially with some of these veteran additions they've made. I mentioned Stephon Gilmore. You already got Byron Murphy Jr. in the secondary. If their safeties hold up, the secondary could at least be good. The front 7, I feel like, is a lot deeper and a lot more versatile than it was a year ago. They've added some talent there, so some reasons for optimism there. And in the running game, I think if Aaron Jones can be the version of himself that he's been when healthy over the last few years, he will give them a dynamic that they have lacked in the last year or two when they just haven't run the ball all that much and have kind of steered away from the run game under Kevin O'Connell. But this is a quarterback league. It's a passing league. You cannot really succeed these days unless you can pass the ball. And so where does that bring us with the Vikings and their presumed starting quarterback for the entirety now, as long as he's healthy, the entirety of the 2024 season, Sam Darnold? I've had this kind of thought rolling around in my head for a while. Can Sam Darnold be this year's Baker Mayfield? There's a lot of comps between the two guys, right? They were both high draft picks in 2018. Mayfield, number 1 overall. Darnold, number 3 overall. Darnold goes to the Jets. Mayfield, of course, started out with the Browns. Darnold jumps in right away, starts right away. Mayfield essentially does the same thing with the Browns. They're asked to kind of carry those franchises. Mayfield has more early success, has a good rookie season, a rookie of the year, falters as a second-year quarterback, but then has a bounce-back year in 2020, which still remains probably his best season, but then things start to fall apart in 2021. He bounces around in 2022, winds up with Tampa Bay in 2023 on like a 1-year deal, trying to kind of resuscitate his career, and you're thinking, okay, he's kind of becoming a little bit of a journeyman at this point, right? Becoming a little bit, not a punchline yet, but not a guy who's a franchise quarterback. Delivers a really good year for Tampa Bay last year. They win the division. They go 9-8. They make the playoffs. They're a different looking team, and all of a sudden his career trajectory has been is heading up again. He signs a big contract in the offseason with Tampa Bay. He is now again thought of as a starting caliber quarterback. Now, like I said, Darnold not quite as accomplished in his Jets days. Had an okay stretch in his second year, but really probably played too early, got thrown into the fire too early. And then the second year, he's got mono, he's seeing ghosts on the sideline, stuff like that. 2020, he has a terrible season with the Jets. All of a sudden, he's bouncing around. He's with Carolina, gets a chance to start some games, but it's not great necessarily. Plays last year as a backup in San Francisco, and now here he is, year 7, just like Baker Mayfield, trying to kind of do the same thing, I would think, that Mayfield did a year ago. Now, the Vikings would be thrilled if Sam Darnold produced the kind of year this year that Baker Mayfield had in Tampa Bay last year. Mayfield played all 17 games, 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, a little over 4,000 yards passing, leads the Buccaneers, like I said, to the playoffs. He's an average to slightly above average quarterback for Tampa Bay on a relatively cheap 1-year contract, and ends up being kind of their, more than just their bridge. He ends up being their guy. Now, Darnold's in a little bit of a different spot. The Vikings have already drafted their quarterback of the future. Every reason to believe that J.J. McCarthy will come back healthy from his torn meniscus and will be that guy next year and beyond. But Darnold's still looking for that same kind of year for the sake of the Vikings' success this year and for the sake of his own career trajectory. So if we dig in a little bit more to kind of their career paths and whether he can produce the same kind of year Mayfield can, a couple things stand out. One of them, is kind of a little bit of a red flag, and one of them is maybe a better comp for how Darnold could play this year and how the Vikings could succeed this year. Darnold's probably one of Darnold's best stretches, the one that the Vikings should probably isolate on right now, is he went 4-2 as a starter with Carolina at the end of the 2022 season. Now, it was kind of a lost year for Carolina. I think they were like 3-8 when he took over, so there was very little pressure for him to perform, but he performed reasonably well. The first 4 games of that stretch in particular probably provide a blueprint for kind of Sam Darnold's path forward. He threw 1 touchdown and no interceptions in each of those 4 games, didn't turn the ball over, no fumbles lost in any of those games. He fumbled once but didn't lose it, so 0 turnovers in 4 games. He's only thrown the ball like in the low 20s each game, though, and Carolina is running the ball like crazy. In fact, in all 4 of those wins, in that 4-2 stretch, Carolina runs the ball more than 40 times. That probably isn't going to happen with this year's Vikings, and I don't think Sam Darnold's the kind of guy where you want him throwing a whole bunch of passes. He did that in a game that year against Tampa Bay, 2022, put up good numbers, had over 300 yards passing, had 3 touchdown passes, also had an interception, also lost 2 fumbles. So you put him in those spots where he is throwing the ball more, dropping back more, he might turn the ball over more. He is more of a game manager type, which Mayfield kind of was last year, if we're being honest, with Tampa Bay. He wasn't throwing a ton of long passes, but he was a little bit more than that. And the cautionary tale in this comp is that Tampa Bay couldn't run the ball at all last year. They were last in the league in rushing yards, last in the league in yards per attempt. I don't think the Vikings could go 9-8 with those kinds of rushing numbers with Sam Darnold as their quarterback. So when you think about that, Mayfield's year last year becomes even more impressive. But results-wise, final numbers-wise, I think Sam Darnold could get close to potentially what Mayfield did if the Vikings can have that better balance. And here, I think we go back to their 2019 season as kind of the blueprint for how you could potentially have success with Sam Darnold. Remember that year? They had thrown the ball a ton in 2018, Kirk Cousins' first season after signing the big contract. They'd only gone 8-7-1, though, fired their offensive coordinator, John DeFilippo, in the middle of the season, brought in Kevin Stefanski, elevated him. 2019, Stefanski gets the full-time job. Vikings essentially ran the ball and passed the ball the same amount that year, about 30 times per game running, 30 times per game passing. It was by far the lowest volume of throwing that Kirk Cousins did in his Vikings career. He was being paid like a star quarterback, and he was being used basically like a game manager. That year, though, they went 10-6. Cousins was 10-5 as a starter. He rested the last week of the season because they'd already clinched a playoff spot but were out of the division race. That was also the last year, by the way, that they won a playoff game, pulled an upset in the division round, won at New Orleans before losing ultimately to the 49ers. But that was kind of the blueprint for the Vikings that year, and they could do that because they still had a very good defense. They had a top 5, top 10 defense still that year. If they can be top 10, top 15 this year, maybe they can kind of win with that model. So you look at the two quarterbacks, Darnold and Mayfield. I don't think they're entirely dissimilar. They both have some escapability. Both can run the ball. Maybe Darnold's a little bit better as a scrambler than Mayfield is. Both of them certainly mobile, and Darnold way more mobile than Kirk Cousins was. I just think you don't want him to get into that territory where he's throwing 35 or 40 times a game. I think your sweet spot with Sam Darnold is probably 25, 30 passes at the most and running the ball about as much this year. Can the Vikings do that? Can Kevin O'Connell be disciplined enough to do that? Can Sam Darnold be efficient enough to move the chains in those regards? Can he limit his turnovers if he's not asked to do too much? Kind of like Mayfield did last season, even though Mayfield didn't have the benefit of a running game last year, which made his effort more impressive. Now, one kind of final loop on this is, of course, 2019 Vikings. Stefanski runs the show. They do well. He's thought of as a leader, kind of restored the offense. He gets the Cleveland job in 2020 off of that year as an offensive coordinator. Baker Mayfield's his quarterback in Cleveland. That's Mayfield's best year. He brings that exact balance to the Browns that year. Almost exactly the same number of pass attempts as run attempts, just like the 2019 Vikings. Browns go 11-5 that year. Mayfield posts his best total QBR, his best, most efficient season. So looking for these guys, unless you have an elite quarterback, you do need some of that balance. You do need a running game. The Vikings need to give Sam Darnold a running game. They need to give him defense this season. If they can do that, I think it is possible that he can approach the kind of year that Mayfield had last season. Now, they're different quarterbacks. I don't know exactly what the final numbers would look like, but I don't think it's absurd to think that Sam Darnold could throw 20-plus touchdowns, throw for 3,500 yards, 4,000 yards, maybe, depending on the attempt level. Probably 3,500 is more the range, and limit his turnovers. But it's going to take a certain kind of combination, one the Vikings haven't really used under Kevin O'Connell. O'Connell's been top 5 in pass attempts, bottom 5 in rush attempts each of his first 2 years with the Vikings. They need to find a better balance this year. If they do, maybe, just maybe, Sam Darnold can have the kind of year Baker Mayfield had last year and resurrect his career in the same way. Let's talk to Twins beat writer Phil Miller today. I feel like, Phil, I always characterize you as the road weary Phil Miller because I feel bad, but it feels like a lot of times when we catch up, it's at the end of a road trip because there's an off day, there's a chance to kind of catch our breath and talk about this team without a game being played. But usually that means it's, a road game, a road series after right before a home series like we're talking about right now. Twins starting home series against the Cardinals, coming off a 4-3 road trip that it had its frustrating moments for sure with the leads they gave up, the bullpen gave up in that last game of the Rangers series and the second game of the Padres series. But overall, you'll take 4-3, and when we make a big deal about them blowing leads, we do tend to gloss over the fact that they won 3 tight, close games in Texas, and that's what made this a successful trip, even with the disappointment of maybe not getting one of those bullpen games.
Yeah. And if it makes you feel any better, Mike, I'm also quite frequently home weary during.
You're not just road weary. You're also okay. Got it.
We're 125 games into this thing.
Just weary.
Yeah, pretty much.
You may get weary.
It was a crazy trip. I think they left a little apprehensive, although on a kind of an upbeat. It was such an odd homestand with winning the first 2 against Cleveland and then losing the first 2. The road trip was like that. They won 3 games, first 3 games of the trip in Texas against the world champions. They trailed in all 3 of those wins and rallied to win. and just clutch hit after clutch hit. Might have had something to do with the Rangers bullpen, yes, but by the time they got to Sunday, the mood was "Look out, world! Here we come," and it was a confident clubhouse. And it's just amazing how quickly it turned. They then lost the next three games, two of them in just the ugliest way possible, just a bullpen meltdown. On Sunday's game, they were up by 4 runs in the seventh inning. I was writing about a sweep of the world champions, and Jorge Alcala gave it back in the space of, I think it was took 9 pitches for the game to be tied, and by the end of the inning, they were behind. It was Stephen Okert in San Diego on Tuesday that kind of did the same thing, turned a 2-run lead in the 8th into a loss. And by Wednesday's game, it felt like, man, can they ever win again? And of course, they came out and just blasted away and got to go home with the biggest one of the biggest wins they've had this year, the second most hits in a game, and I'm certain arrived home feeling good. It was I don't know if it was a sense of relief. It was just as much a sense of oh yeah, that we're back. So it was a 4-3 trip, not an easy trip, and they still had a winning record. They of the 7 games, 5 were started by rookies. Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton, 2 of their 3 most dynamic hitters, were not on the trip. And now they're home for a week and a half. It's just when you think things are going right, they turn around. So maybe this is a bad sign, but it's certainly different than it was a few days ago.
Well, and to your point about just when you think it's going well, it turns. Just when you think it's not going well, it turns the other way. I made this point on the podcast the other day when I was kind of chastising myself for being like, well, that they're going to lose now. I even texted you that the other day. Well, I sense a blowout. And then, of course, it was a blowout in the other direction. Yeah. Athletes don't believe in momentum the same way writers do. Is that fair to say?
Oh, it's very, very fair to say. Yeah. It used to be that the first question of the manager, Gardy, Molitor, Rocco, from the TV network that broadcast them was always, how does last night's game carry you over? Do you build momentum for that? Or you lost last night. Does that, how is today? How can you turn it around? And the players don't really think about it like that. Every day is a new challenge. Every day is a new pitcher and a new opponent and a new lineup. And it's fair to say that if it's an extended bit of a long winning streak, I think confidence builds. But Rocco insisted after both of those bullpen blowups that the solution to that is to win tomorrow.
And you mentioned there's, games coming fast and furious. The majority of those are being started by rookies these days. Like you said, 5 out of 7 on the trip started by rookies. I mean, Woods Richardson, 2 decisions, 2 wins on the trip. David Festa, Zebby Matthews. Matthews got in trouble with his control a little bit, then the 0-2 pitch that didn't work out for him. But he looks like he, has a chance to belong. Festa doesn't look out of place. Woods Richardson, I keep waiting, maybe in the wrong way, waiting for the other shoe to drop because we just didn't have a lot of expectations for him coming into the year. But he keeps giving them 5 good innings more often than not, and sometimes more. So when do we get to the point where we say, okay, stop worrying so much about how young these guys are and start saying, okay, they've got a chance to be okay?
Yeah, I do think that I think a lot of people assumed Simeon, when he came up, was just a placeholder until the Twins made a move or Festa was ready, because Simeon got the job. He didn't make the team out of spring training, and he got the job when Louis Varland had
Right.
such a terrible April. And I don't. You're right. I don't think expectations were very high, and he's not a flamethrower. He was never, one of the top 5 prospects in the organization. They got him just via trade, and I think he has clearly been underrated. He would be the first to tell you he is kind of a product of the research and development department, the people who show him what he could be doing better and how, and it has worked out really well. And you can see him kind of maturing too. He's developing into a pitcher who can take a deep breath and see what is going wrong here and make adjustments. I was struck in the finale of that trip that he threw 29 pitches in the first inning. He issued 2 walks, loaded the bases, and we're just in the press box. We're just watching the pitch count mount. We were talking about it, like, does Rocco pull the starting pitcher in the first inning? They don't have the bullpen for that, and he got out of it. He got out of it without a run, and when he came back out, he was a different pitcher, speeding up the time between pitches, becoming more aggressive, and mowing him down. And he only gave up 2 hits the rest of the 5 innings. It'd have been nice if he could have gone 7, but that's what the 29 pitches in the first inning cost him. But it was a really impressive, mature start by a pitcher that we probably should stop underestimating.
And what about Festa and Matthews? Do we, they didn't make a move at the deadline. I've kind of been on them for that, and I'm not the only one, but they couldn't have known at that moment that Joe Ryan was going to get hurt a few days later, and we'll get to his timetable maybe here in a minute, along with Correa, Buxton, Paddock, Brooks Lee, guys like that. But, you think about those guys, the guys they do have, and like we said, 3 out of the 5 guys in the rotation are rookies right now. When they had to dip down for a doubleheader starter and another start, they went with Louis Varland, a guy who's still very young. Like, we're talking about a lot of youth here. Are they as much more less of a concern than the bullpen right now? How do you kind of parse where they're at with all the pitching right now?
I would have thought so, and I should correct the record. It was 4 of the 7 games
4 of the 7.
rookies.
Okay.
I forgot that was Bailey Ober who started the first
That's
game.
right.
But
that's right.
But still, rookies started the majority of the games,
Correct.
and they had a winning road trip. I've thought the same thing. It was around this time of the season last year when they signed Dallas Keuchel out of nowhere, I guess much was made around here of Rich Hill being available. So they may have, I don't know if they're shopping around, but the kids are all right, to coin a 40-year-old rock music phrase. It turns out that they are not overwhelmed, and I've heard 2 of them talk this week about just how accepted they feel in the clubhouse. This is not a team that there are a lot of teams where rookies, by definition, they're taking someone's job, they're taking someone's place, and
right.
There are clubhouses. Rocco said he was a player in one once, where rookies are just expected to sit over there and just shut up. And the Festa and Zebby Matthews and Simeon, they are very much a part of the team, and I do think it helps. After each of Zebby Matthews' starts, we have asked Rocco, will there be another one? I mean, there's been 2, and will there be another one? And the other day, Rocco went on kind of a little soliloquy about, look, we didn't intend for this situation, but we've got it, and we can make some good out of it. Let's see what the kid's got, and it's pretty encouraging. He lost a game in the most ironic way possible because he walked two batters in the same inning, which he never ever does, and they both scored. But otherwise, pitched really well. You forget that these guys are 21, 23, 24, but they are accepted in the Twins clubhouse and feel a part of it. And I mean, Simeon was talking about how fired up he is about the pennant race yesterday, and that's pretty encouraging for a team that he hasn't spent the entire year with.
And in that race, I mean, Thursday, the Guardians lose to the Yankees again. It's just 2 games now that the Twins are back of Cleveland. The Twins get a chance to maybe do a little bit more damage here now that they're home for a while, though none of those games will be easy necessarily. But the big advantage the Guardians have, aside from still having the division lead, is their bullpen is the best in baseball, and it's not close in terms of bullpen ERA. It's like a half a run better than anybody else and more than a run, run and a quarter better than the Twins. How does that influence how we should think, both about both those teams and how this race sets up, as we get closer to September now?
Well, the big series in Cleveland, third week of next month. That you always think that that's what it might come down to, and it really might this year. I would say that the Twins' concern about their bullpen has kind of been well placed. They're losing 2 or 3 guys that they thought they would have all year. Brock Stewart, the big one, but Justin Topa. I doubt that either one of them are going to have any effect. Rocco was really, really concerned about the schedule, about 14 games in 13 days. And he cited that several times, and you could see, I think some moves were dictated by that. They still have all the confidence in the world in Griffin Jacks and Yon Duran, but I do feel like they absolutely only want them to pitch in situations where they're ahead now. And sometimes they don't really have a bridge to get to them. So that is a concern. Jorge Alcala had been the kind of the savior of the bullpen, and maybe he still is. It was one game, and it was one horrible game, and he certainly appeared crushed by it, I would say, in the clubhouse. But, if he bounces back and pitches the way he was in June and July, that solves a lot of things. The truth is they've been kind of piecing it together as best they can all year. And it's got them to 71 wins and 35 games left. Do they have the bullpen to get there? Yeah, I think they do. And then, of course, then you get to the postseason and the bullpen becomes even bigger. They have advantages over Cleveland if they're healthy. But maybe bullpen isn't going to be one of them.
Imagine the temptation at some point would be Louis Varland. You go do the thing you did last year, but they also probably can't necessarily do that because he is quite possibly the next guy up if some other starter goes down or if one of these rookies has a couple bad outings, right?
Yeah. I will say that the bullpen is it has been like that too. They bring guys up and they brought him up and sent him down so quickly. So do you remember the Scott Blewett era? They are bringing up guys only because they're the only ones available. Ronnie Henriquez was kind of that way. I don't think he was their choice to be called up, but he was under the rules. He was available, and he ended up having one good outing and one not so good outing. But um, uh, yeah, the I do think Louis Varland will end up in the bullpen. I think they would do it now if they felt like they had another starting pitcher available. You are right; they need to keep him. They need to keep him ready just in case. But there are only 35 games left. That necessity is going to become less critical. I mean, they could bring up Randy Dobnak. They could start Josh Winder if it was a real emergency. So I am almost certain that Louis Varland will be pitching in relief out of the Twins bullpen in September.
A couple more things, Phil. You brought up, the injuries that they've had, the big ones. Correa, Buxton, I think Brooks Lee falls in that category. Obviously, Joe Ryan, Chris Paddock too. What kind of timetable do you think we have on any and all of those guys at this point?
I would say the short version is be optimistic about Byron Buxton and Brooks Lee, be pessimistic about Carlos Correa and the two pitchers, and anything you get will be a bonus. Quickly, Byron Buxton, they didn't his back is better. He appears ready. He worked out on Thursday for the Twins trainers. It would not surprise me if he is activated on Friday. Maybe it's the Twins, so maybe they give it a day or two extra. But there was genuine optimism. I'll tell you how there was optimism is the training staff was really annoyed by the Green Day and Journey concerts because we said, has Byron been running the bases? Has Carlos been running the bases? And we were told there are no bases. There's a stage. But there is optimism about Byron Buxton. Carlos Correa, I'll never forget the 2 days before he went on the injured list. He told us this was no big thing, that he would be back after the All-Star break right away, certainly by the end of July. And I think Friday is 7 weeks. I think it's still up and down. There is still pain management. When Nick Paparesta said, it's a matter of pain management, I said, is there still pain at this point? He said, yeah, not every day, but yes, on certain occasions there is. And that's a terrible sign. That if he comes back, and I do think he'll probably be back, but I do think it'll be the reduced Carlos Correa that we saw last year. I don't know how we can have any other conclusion after 7 weeks now. He will probably test it on a rehab assignment, but I think at some point he will just kind of put on all the safety gear he can and not run out ground balls and try his best just to play through it and let it heal over the winter the way it did this past winter. It's really discouraging. He was the best player on the team, and it happened again. Joe Ryan, I don't see any way he's back this year. Even if he got healthy enough at the end of the month, they'd need to ramp him up. If he pitches again, I would say it's World Series Game 3.
Okay,
because that would be enough time for him maybe to get ready. Brooks Lee probably will be back in the next week. And Paddock is going on Tuesday. He will have another MRI, and at that point, they will decide. And they expect it to be good. And he says he's fine. At that point, they will begin ramping up. But at that point, it will also be September or a couple of days short of it. The ramping up might take some time. If he comes back, it'll be at the end of September, and it will be in the bullpen, which was what it was last year, and he was useful. Mm-hmm. So that's not nothing. But the effect he'll have will be minimal and will be late.
You're basically telling me it's going to be like, unless they're ineffective or not healthy, it's going to be these three rookies in the rotation for the rest of this stretch run.
Yes, I would think so. The only other possibility is there are rumors going around that there are teams like the Texas Rangers who have a big payroll and aren't going to make the playoffs that might waive players whose contracts are up at the end of the season, just in hopes that somebody would claim them and take a month of salary off of the books for them. Would the Twins pony up for a month of Jacob deGrom? I don't think deGrom is his contract is up now, but you would have to. It would be somebody with a big salary, and they would not be playoff eligible, and they're be free agents. So it's mostly a fantasy, but other than that, other than picking up Dallas Keuchel, I think this is the rotation, and Rocco doesn't sound unhappy about it. He has some faith in these guys, and he was talking about he has seen them improve, and it's a lot of fun watching them get better.
Well, we'll see if they can. We'll see if they can keep it going in this homestand. Like I've said a couple different times, it puts a lot of pressure on the Pablo Lopez starts and the Bailey Ober starts, just because it feels like those are magnified. And unfortunately, those two bullpen blown games were both of were Pablo and Bailey Ober starts. So that was kind of a double
and very strong
double whammy.
Pablo and Bailey Ober starts too. They were wins.
Yes. Yeah, so we'll see if they can keep it going, but it's a fascinating stretch run. I can't remember them having the rookies to try this with, and B, the necessity to do it. But that's the hand they're dealt, and I guess we'll just kind of see.
Yeah, I'll say when you're around them, they're a confident bunch. I tell you, they for all the trials and tribulations. I mean, Royce Lewis will be positive until the day he dies. But
right.
He was walking around the other day telling the writers, we're going to win this. We're going to win this. I didn't even ask him what he meant, today's game or the division title,
the World Series, whatever. Yeah,
the World Series.
He probably believes it all. He believes it all.
He does, but he's not the only one in that clubhouse.
Okay. Well, Phil, appreciate it. Thanks for taking time. Get rested up. Don't be home weary. It's a long homestand. So we'll read your coverage and we'll see you soon.
I believe my governor told me we'll sleep when we're dead.
That's right. That's right. Thanks, Phil.
All right, Mike.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
Great stuff from Phil. And I should mention, of course, this is not a two-team race in the AL Central. The Royals right there with the Twins at 71 and 56, just 2 games back of the Guardians, who are 73 and 54. All 3 teams, according to Fangraphs, have at least a 75% chance of making the playoffs, and all 3 still have a decent shot at winning the division. The Guardians, of course, still the favorites. They have the lead right now, but they're given a 47% chance of winning the division. Twins at 34%, and the Royals just below 20%. So this will play out. You can't just forget about Kansas City. They've had a great year, a great bounce-back year from where they were. This will probably go down to the wire. Fangraphs really feels like this is going to be a tight race all the way to the finish. We'll see if the Twins and their rookie pitchers and, quite frankly, their thin at times bullpen can get them there. Let's finish with the cooler. Like I said at the beginning, it's not just the Twins as the only show in town this week, even though they have this long homestand. The Lynx, 2 huge games tonight against Las Vegas. They beat Vegas in Vegas on Wednesday. Now they play them again here tonight. Can they win again? Can they create some separation in the Western Conference standings, the WNBA standings, with the defending champs coming to town? The very next night, Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever come to town. Should be a packed Target Center, not just for that, but because it is also the jersey retirement of Maya Moore Irons. She will be here. She will be, getting her justified place in Lynx history. One of the all-time WNBA greats, one of the great basketball players, icons of this generation. That will be a tremendous night at Target Center. Earlier that day, around 5:30, Minnesota United resumes its schedule after a long break. Leagues Cup play, they were out of that early, so it's been a few weeks since they've played. 9 games left in the MLS season, the home stretch for them, and a whole bunch of new players from the transfer window coming in right now. Can they have an impact? We talked about both of those things earlier this week. John Marthaler was on with me on Tuesday. Kent Youngblood was on with me on Wednesday, so go back and check those episodes for more on the Loons and the Lynx. That will do it for me today. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Maybe get out to the fair. I'll be there on Monday and Tuesday with multiple Star Tribune appearances, including an Access Vikings recording at 11 a.m. Monday with Ben Gessling and Andrew Kramer. So look for us at the fair. Star Tribune booth, Minnesota. Star Tribune, don't forget it. We are new. We are rebranded. Come check us out. Come check out the new booth. Regardless of whether we see you out there at the fair, Royce will be with me on Monday. Until then, I'm Michael Rand, back at it again in a couple days.